It's Bengals-Ravens week, so who better to bring on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast than Dan Clasgens from Fantistics Insider, the Fantistics Insider Podcast, and the Sirius XM Show, all coming up next on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Jeff Erickson here. As always, we are brought to you by Circa Sports and Splash Sports. Today, my guest is Dan Clasgens, the great host from Fantistics Insider. You catch him Saturdays on Sirius XM Fantasy, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, as well as the Fantistics Insider podcast with James Adams that drops on Tuesday. Dan, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Oh, Jeff, thrilled to be here, man. Really appreciate you inviting me. And, it could be a bit better right now. I mean, obviously, the Bengals, we both have that in common. A big game tomorrow night, but it's been a fun season. It's going a little too fast, if you want to know my opinion.
Absolutely. Huge week. Awful loss last week. It's the type of game the Bengals never lose under Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow, and they found a way to lose that game. It was one of those where it's just, that was the old Bengals. That's the stuff we expected in the bad old days.
I will say, they were dealing with some key injuries. Obviously, I mean, everybody was talking about T. Higgins in the fantasy landscape, but the loss of Sam Hubbard, I think, was even more impactful in this matchup. But hey, I mean, we can talk about the Bengals and maybe getting outplayed, out hustled, out coached. I mean, they said that themselves, but let's give credit where credit is due here. I mean, the Texans, what a great story. And, I'm not a big Ohio State fan. I certainly saw a lot of C.J. Stroud in his college days because we're plastered with it here in the Cincinnati market. But at the end of the day, it's the first time I put my eyeballs on the guy. And what he's doing this season is legit. I mean, it's special. Mm-hmm. The way he's taking care of the football. I know he had a key pick in that game, but still that touchdown interception ratio. But Jeff, the way he moves around the pocket and eludes him, and then at the same time has these deep ball throws with the precision. And I mean, C.J. Stroud, I think he's going to have big things ahead. And I maybe was a little skeptical before witnessing it with my own eyes, but I am all in on him for fantasy purposes moving forward here.
Oh, 100% agree. I have big regrets in my dynasty league that I didn't grab. Big regrets.
Not as big of regrets as the Panthers have, apparently.
Oh, no. Maybe even the Bears for trading down when they, the verdict's still out on Justin Fields, another Ohio State guy. We'll see, and we'll get to him in a little bit here. But, yeah, I couldn't be more impressed. He throws guys open, like you said, moves around in the pocket, makes the right decision. The play that caught, I think that was the biggest eye-opener for me, is one that didn't even count. The Robert Woods catch in the end zone where he's ruled that he barely stepped out of bounds. That was like his sixth read when he was under pressure, scrambling to his right and through this perfect dime leading him there. That's only about 5 or 6 quarterbacks can make that throw.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I mean, we know Stroud's going to be money for fantasy down the stretch here. I think we agree on that, but figuring out which Texans receivers to play. I mean, when Nico Collins comes back, Noah Brown obviously has made a splash. We know Robert Woods, you just mentioned him. He's got healthy. I think Tank Dell's the best fantasy option, at least in the bunch. And then, obviously Dalton Schultz has emerged in himself as just a weekly locked-in starter, I think, now in season long. So it's going to be really tough to figure out where it's going to go each week. And as exciting as this Texans passing game is to me, I think it's going to create some fantasy headaches potentially down the stretch when all these players are healthy.
Oh, fully agree. And Collins can play too. Collins is legit. And the fact that
he was the guy that I have the most best ball shares of, because Nico Collins was like my man as wide receiver 5 there in May and June and July. And I've got so much best ball exposure to him.
Right.
But and let's not take anything past the Texans coaching. I mean, I don't want to make the whole podcast here the Texans podcast, but I mean, from top down, that staff has done a great job. They've rebuilt not just the roster here a little bit, but just the team's attitude, the morale, the chemistry, the fan base. It's an exciting time to be a Texans fan.
Absolutely. And how quickly the narrative changes. My friend Scott Pianowski from Yahoo always says it's a reshuffle league, and the Texans are this year's example of that for sure. Let's get into Thursday night's game. So no T. Higgins once again. No Hubbard once again, but the Bengals will have Trey Hendrickson, and we didn't think that was going to be possible. At least I didn't think it was going to be possible. Seeing the injury, seeing the initial reports on that hyperextended knee, not even on the injury report on Wednesday.
Oh my goodness. I'll tell you, man, as I was watching the game on Sunday, still trying to get over Tyler Boyd's drop, and the fact that, they had their chance to come back and win this game. And at the stadium, it was interesting because literally a third of the fans had left before the Cam Taylor-Britt interception. So we, rightfully so, they were playing like that. But I don't leave games, so I mean, I was still there. But dude, when they got the big play there by Noah Brown, I was literally watching. I saw it happen immediately, and I was like, oh, I literally watched how his leg broke, and I was looking at my wife, and I was like, this is not good. I was like, we just lost this game, but we may have just lost the season, because I've been touting here locally on local radio in some of my spots. I believe Trey Hendrickson's the MVP of this team. So to have him go down was devastating. The fact he's coming back, I mean, I know you're a longtime Bengal fan. The only guy I can even put in the same level of toughness in my nearly 4 decades of following the team here is Tim Crumry. Because Trey Hendrickson, I mean, last year he played without a collarbone. He played without this. Why is it important, though, that he's back for this game? I mean, even if he's not at 100% here, his presence does help. It's not just the pass rush. I mean, he gets the sacks, but it's when him and Hubbard are going right, their ability to keep guys like Lamar Jackson in the pocket, and, all the other benefits it has in the other parts of that defense is huge. In terms of the game, though, we're looking at 2 teams here that, know each other very well. I definitely think that the Ravens' strength also lines up with the Bengals' weakness a bit in terms of their ability to stop the run. No team's given up more yardage, 10-yard plus runs here. You look at the number of 10-yard runs and the rate of run percentage, so that nobody gives up bigger chunks in the Bengals. So I am very concerned about the defense still playing without Sam Hubbard here against this Ravens team. But that said, they got to stop the Bengals offense too. And this time around, unlike week 2, they're going to have a Joe Burrow that has his full tool of arsenals at his disposal, at least in terms of his own skill sets.
Right. Yeah. Alas, no Higgins, but the thing about Tyler Boyd is he's now had 2 high-profile drops. The Super Bowl also is another one there. I won't forget that one either, unfortunately. But other than that, I mean, he's discovered he has a tight end now in Tanner Hudson. I don't know. He's a kind of a journeyman sort of guy. It's not like this rising prospect that they've been, waiting for his moment to splash, but he's been good the last 2 weeks at least.
Yeah, I really think that if the Bengals are going to keep this game close, they can't afford to fall behind, right?
Yep, agreed.
If they get to a spot where Baltimore is able to be up more than a score and run, it's going to be an uphill battle. So they've got to come out quick. I think they know that. I will say that at least over the last couple seasons, that some of Joe Burrow's best performances have been when their backs are against the wall. And you can do the math 7 ways to Sunday. If they want to have any chance at a division title, this is a must-win game. I'm not necessarily thinking that their entire playoff hopes are hinged on this game. Sure, their percentages are much better with a win here than a loss. The AFC is getting tough. Buffalo, I think we've determined that they're not a playoff team. And what the Bengals have to their benefit here is pretty much everybody ahead of them. The Chiefs, the Ravens today and this week, the Steelers, the Browns, the Jaguars. I mean, you look at the teams, they just played the Texans, but if you look at the 7 playoff teams right now ahead of the Bengals in the AFC, outside the Texans, who they played last week, and the Ravens they played this week, everybody else is still on the schedule. So they do control their own destiny to some extent if they win in those games. But, I mean, the math is the math here, and this isn't just the Bengals. I think it's 10 wins could get you in maybe in the AFC. I think their teams are going to beat up on each other. I think 10 wins get you there. I think where Cincinnati's a little challenged is they already have a very poor conference record.
Right. We got to find another NFC West team to play. Can we create someone that's your NFC West? Because that seems to work.
Yeah, but overall, the matchup tomorrow night, we've had some duds on Thursdays. From a fantasy perspective, this is a matchup that, you're going to start your people and hope for their normal, if not better, performances. The real question is Lamar Jackson. I mean, the guy's an MVP candidate, but statistically, because of the run game has been as successful as it has, I mean, he has become a fantasy dud. And I know you get probably 3 times as amount of questions hitting you as I do, but I can't tell you how many questions a week I get Lamar, and he's just not an automatic lock-in. Now, I'm going to start him with confidence in this matchup, especially knowing that the Bengals are missing Hubbard and they've struggled in these capacities. Right. But, I mean, as much as he's in the MVP race, he's also in the consideration for, like, fantasy bust at quarterbacks and based off of draft position and guys that haven't been hurt. You take injuries out of it. I don't know who's been more sporadic of those top 6 or 7 quarterbacks. I mean, outside of Trevor Lawrence. I mean, obviously Fields has been hurt, but Burrow to his own extent was basically shouldn't have played it for a few weeks, but did. So Lamar Jackson doesn't have that excuse. His only excuse is his team's other success.
Yeah, that's true. And the fact that they had 2 blowout games where he didn't play the fourth quarter probably didn't help. They didn't ask him to do that much. I'm concerned about Keaton Mitchell. John Harbaugh said that Mitchell's going to get more reps. He only had 4 snaps in the second half yet last week there. Despite having 2 big plays, it's like, you had this evidence in front of you that he could really help out, and then they didn't use him when they needed him most. I don't think they make that mistake again. Harbaugh's a smart coach.
Yeah, and as I alluded to, the Bengals give up chunks of plays on the ground, even when healthy here. So I'm not shying away from Keaton Mitchell this week, but it's really about your own risk tolerance because, I mean, the carries are a bit limited. It's also going to look at what your roster options are, right? I mean, I've got some lineups where I actually was lucky enough to get a hold of Keaton Mitchell, but everybody's healthy, nobody's on bye. I mean, I'm not going to start him as a top 10 or 15 play. I will say in showdown slates and such, I mean, Keaton Mitchell is almost a must-check box on my board in some of those lineups because of that big play potential and price point and such, which is rising, but still at a fair price depending on your platform.
Indeed. Prediction on final score in this game. We'll move on to the rest of the slate.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's going to be close. These are usually field goal contest. So I've already bet the Bengals plus the 4. So okay. I do think they're going to come in. I think there's some value on the money line. Whoever comes out on top here, a touchdown or less, but I've got a 24-21 as my official online prediction, which is pretty much right on the things. But I'm a bit biased. I am, yes. But I honestly do believe that there's more at stake here for Cincinnati than there is for Baltimore, and that could be the deciding factor in this contest.
Let's hope. I'm kind of a self-hating Bengals fan right now. I don't have the opportunity to bet because I'm out in California and apparently never will, but we'll see about that one there. Let's move on to the rest of the slate. First, quick note, though, from the Blue Wire Network. Our broadcasts are always on the Blue Wire Network. Thank you for your indulgence there. I'm with Dan Clasgens of Fantistics Insider and the SiriusXM show of the same name. Let's talk quarterbacks. Let's talk. We woke up to big news. Deshaun Watson out for the year. Not only did they kind of downplay the ankle injury, which he getting an MRI is fine. No, he had a high ankle sprain, but more importantly, he had a broken bone in his shoulder. He's out for the year. He's going to have surgery. This kind of just ends the saga, at least. And then they threw us another curveball and announced that they're going door number 3 at Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I actually kind of respect their decision on this because I think PJ Walker is litigated already. We know what he is. DTR might be something that is viable, but I don't think the Browns win a playoff game with Walker. They might with DTR.
I mean, they could have won a bunch of them with Josh Dobbs, or Jacoby Brissett, or Baker Mayfield, or any of these other quarterbacks that they've booted out of here.
True.
Karma is not a kind, my friend, and Cleveland sold their soul to get Deshaun Watson, and I've got burned on Deshaun Watson a little bit in some places from a fantasy perspective, but I don't get the sense the guy wants to play football, if you want to know the truth. I mean, that's just my own inferences. I mean, obviously not based on fact here, but the whole thing's just been weird. Even before the previous injury and the way the team has handled it today, how they release it in this like press release infographic 7-paragraph statement. Yeah. Like, the whole thing's just been awkward. It's a marriage that's not going to end well. And it's really disappointing for Cleveland fans, I'm sure, because here's a team that is as good as any in football on the roster when you look at it when they're completely healthy. And I have to feel for the Browns fans, that I generally have many of that I, in my family and live around here. A lot of our families in Ohio, so in the Clasgens and my mom's side of the family, especially half of them are Browns fans. So yeah. This has been like a long life we sort of laugh at each other over the decades of fandom here. But dude, they lost Jack Conklin, they lost Nick Chubb, they've lost Deshaun Watson. Regardless of whether you think about Watson and signing him and the deal and the karma and all the things I'm throwing out there, they've had a run of bad luck here, and here they are, still being right in control of a chance at winning this division. So hats off to the coaching staff. Hats off to, especially on the defensive side of the ball, what they've been able to do. I don't want to have to match up against that defense in Myles Garrett, but from a fantasy perspective, this is buzzkill city for me. I mean, I guess Jerome Ford is still in the mix, but with Hunt having his carve at the goal line, and you've got obviously Pierre Strong getting just enough carries to be a nuisance. He's like that rain. Pierre Strong Jr. is like that rain that barely is raining, but it's enough to get you wet, but you're not going to bust out the umbrella, and the wind's blowing, so you can't keep the hood up. I mean, that's what that backfield is to me. So, yes, if you're looking at for this specific week, we're going to have to wait and see what the quarterback situation unfolds. We know what P.J. Walker was, so I guess there's some hope and optimism. But outside of Cooper and Jerome Strong and the Browns defense, and probably the best fantasy relevant Brown at this point moving forward is going to be Dustin Hopkins.
Yeah, that's sad.
The rest of it's droppable. I don't want anything to do with
even Cooper.
Well, no, I said outside of Cooper.
Oh, Cooper outside. I didn't hear you about that.
I don't want Njoku. I don't want any of these other receivers. Elijah Moore, I mean, even when things are clicking right here, I mean, outside of, PPR leagues, you can count on 8 to 10. But this offense is a mess right now. The schedule's not getting any easier. And, I'm feeling pretty sad about it because in my Scott Fishbowl, we had live draft here in Cincinnati. And, dude, I crushed it. Like, I executed my plan to precision out of that 12 hole there. And I'm on the fringe of the playoffs. But the problem is the 3 quarterbacks that I started the season with were Deshaun Watson, Daniel Jones, and Mac Jones. Ooh. And here I am on the cusp of the playoffs. I don't have anything. I've got, Tommy DeVito and Tyrod Taylor and now both Browns backup quarterbacks. I picked up Marcus Mariota and Jacoby Brissett just to stash. So I'm just like, dude, I've got like the most stud running backs, receivers that you could ever imagine.
So I had LA live Fishbowl, and I went Burrow Dak, and
I wish I could have got
my
that.
Season started right now, and I have Baker as my third actually too. So
you're loaded, my friend. Now your problem is who you sitting.
Don't look at my running backs. That's all I'm saying. Please do not look at the running backs. Like
maybe I wish we could work out a cross country trade or something. Right. But trades in Scott Fishbowl.
So painful. I mean, I literally had Cam Akers as a best option at my running back for like 4 weeks. I mean, that's how bad it is. I had job battles lost and injuries, you name it. All
fantasy teams are dealing with something. And the other thing is this is you've been doing this a long time, and I've been ranking or doing some sort of fantasy content for 2 decades myself. I can't remember a season that was just harder to figure out.
Yeah.
I mean, 1 minute the Broncos D's giving up 70 to the Dolphins, and the next 2 weeks they're shutting down Mahomes and Allen in back-to-back games. Just here a few short weeks later. So it's like,
twice with Mahomes too.
In the business of being a prognosticator, I mean, we make educated guesses, and they're getting a lot harder to make.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was just gonna say, in season, that just these sea changes. Dallas, we're gonna run the ball. We're gonna be a slow offense, or Dak, why don't you just go throw 40 times and throw for 400 yards? Either way, we're good. I mean, I'm don't get me wrong. My CD Lamb shares are just singing for joy all of a sudden now.
CD Lamb. I mean, if we were redrafting today and we had a Heroes versus Host drafted, your guy Jim Coventry participated on Veterans Day with us over there on Sirius XM, and I got way off. I was hosting and drafting, and my co-host had technical problems. So like I had the worst draft ever. Oh, no. So I throw out my draft from that. But like I was anxious. Like, where does CeeDee Lamb go? I mean, if I was redrafting today and dial it into it, I I definitely think he's probably wide receiver 1 on my board if I'm drafting today.
I might go Brown. I might go AJ Brown first, but I hear you. It's close.
Yeah.
The fact
my point is, it's not Jefferson. It's not Chase.
No.
I mean, Tyreek Hill is the only other name I think I would throw into the mix. The point is like it's been awesome. And, Dallas is a team that I wasn't really buying into, frankly. Dak Prescott especially, but I've been wrong. I'll admit when I was wrong. And that, every week it seems like they're playing the weakest team in the league. I don't know. Can I get in a Survivor contest where I can just use the Cowboys every week? Because it seems like they have the easiest schedule in the history of football.
We're not going to talk about Survivor right now. Last week was very tough.
Oh, dude, I already know. I was catching you on lunch break. I know you went with the Bengals there on the Circa stuff. But I
have been. I mean, my problem was I couldn't find the pivot. Like I knew I had to hold on to the Cowboys for Thanksgiving because
that Thanksgiving rule in that contest definitely made that one an easy decision. I think. So.
Yeah,
the process is right, Jeff. The process was right. You can't. Your process was right. It just the result didn't go the way. But you know what? It would have worked out if Tyler Boyd held on to the football.
What you do, Tyler Boyd? What you do? Terrible.
I've got a long history in Survivor with my heart there with the Bengals, and I bet on or against them. My worst story was it was a hometown pool under the table thing years ago. So I'm out, but it was all cash. It was worth about 20 G's. It was down to about 9 guys. I was the only one with the Bengals. You obviously had the winner. If you tie or lose, you are knocked out. And that was the tie that they had versus Donovan McNabb. I don't know how many years ago you can remember this.
I remember that.
Carson Palmer, Donovan McNabb. They did not remember. The Bengals were like 4-12. And I was saying to my buddies in tailgate, like I took the Eagles that day because they were supposed to smoke them. And my buddy's like, how can you pick against Spanish? I was like, well, here, man, you know what? If I lose and the Bengals get a win, I'm going to leave here. I'll be all right with it because it's been so long since I've seen a win. And they tied. So that was the day I canceled my season tickets the first time. But Survivor's a cruel game. But, in terms of back to my point here is like trying to figure out the league is tougher than it's ever been. But you still got to stick to your process. The process, it's not always right. But more often than not, as you know, somebody like me that's played fantasy for decades, more often than not, the process, the majority of the time is going to work out. And that's what people have to remember is nobody's 100% here. You're hoping to go 60% on these calls.
I was just going to say any good better is like hoping for 57%.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so if you get 60, you're a god. And that's really funny how that works. Josh Allen. Turnover machine again. He's almost like he's reverted back to his rookie year almost. They fired Ken Dorsey. What's wrong with the Bills? What's wrong with Josh Allen?
I mean, I do wonder about his shoulder. It was obviously a problem last year. I mean, he does play hurt. I mean, he's a tough guy. But, some of the things that gave him such a huge upside as well, I believe is, his aggressiveness, his desire to make the tough throws, to gun it down the field. I mean, those are why you've seen 40, 50-point days. I think we all would agree that, Ken Dorsey was a bit of a scapegoat on Tuesday morning. I mean, he wasn't the one doing these things, but you know how that goes. Sometimes a move like that does sort of shake things up, makes people realize things. I mean, the thing is I don't think Josh Allen is ever going to not be a guy that's going to make mistakes based off of that style. I do say that the more concerning thing for me is and we started to see signs of it last year after they got knocked out of the playoffs by the Bengals and, Stephon Diggs. It seems like the team in general isn't as cohesive. That Sean McDermott doesn't necessarily have quite the grip on it. The honeymoon's sort of over there. The salary cap is not in their favor. And then you get players that are just inconsistent. I mean, Josh Allen, it's easy to see the 11 picks and league leading and have the concerns. But, I mean, Gabe Davis stopping on routes, making wrong plays.
Yeah.
They've had a number of players come in and out of the lineup, injury. I mean, Dawson Knox has opened up the door for Dalton Kincaid. It's also taken away a trusted source, a key blocker. James Cook, even in his own right, hasn't been very consistent. So, I don't know. I mean, it sucks that he's thrown the picks from fantasy. I mean, you're still going to put him in there and do it, but I'm looking at this Buffalo team. I don't anticipate them being a playoff team in the AFC at this point. And as I'm looking towards next year, it's like, what else? I mean, do they want to just try to keep adding pieces and robbing Peter to pay for Paul? Or at what point do you realize, all right, this particular setup here isn't going to work? And then you look at the division, I mean, obviously the Dolphins are a first-class team, but, the Jets, they don't really have a quarterback of the future. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, if he comes back this year or even next, I mean, the guy's on the wrong side of 40, and the Patriots in rebuild mode. So if I'm the Bills, like, I don't want to blow it up too much. I want to, keep pushing here. Why I think that this division is up for grabs. I mean, the AFC East, if you look at it from top to bottom, and I never thought I would say this, but I mean, right now, I might say it's the worst division in the AFC.
Yeah, the South is rising. So
the South is rising. We know the North is loaded. And then I look at the West and I'm like, well, I mean, the Chiefs are just as good as the Dolphins. And then you got the Chargers, the Raiders. I don't know. It's pretty close, I guess. But
the Raiders are a real team again.
The Raiders have an attitude. They got a good defense. And, I mean, the Chargers they got all the talent in the world. They just haven't really been able to capitalize on it. So, I don't know. It's concerning for Josh Allen. If I'm ranking QBs right now, we talked about where CeeDee Lamb would rank. He's a guy that I still consider a top 4 or 5 fantasy quarterback just because of his rushing prowess and that aggressiveness we talked about. And I do believe that now that we're seeing this coaching change, we're going to see a continued emphasis on him being a little bit more of himself and not trying to be something he's not. Yeah, it's great. We don't even want him to run and get hurt, but Josh Allen is Josh Allen. And when you start trying to make quarterbacks and players be somebody they're not and force them into this other thing, which I get the reasoning of it, you lose a little bit of what makes them the player they are. So,
yeah. Josh Allen, by the way, leads all quarterbacks in fantasy points this year and second on a per game basis behind Hurts. So.
Let me throw this out there. If I'm right and they're not a playoff team, and that becomes a little more obvious here in another couple of weeks. And I'm also right in speculating that the shoulder is a bigger issue. I mean, there's a scenario where Josh Allen gets shut down here at the key point of the fantasy season.
Wow. How massive would that be?
I mean, seriously. I mean, let's say, in a couple of weeks, they're 2 games out of the next closest playoff thing, and Allen's still lingering. I mean, nobody's really talking about it, but I mean, there is a scenario where I could see that play out where it would make sense.
Yeah. Indeed. I could see that too. Another team that's got to figure it out is the Bears with Josh Fields. He's coming back this week. Tyson Bagent was a fun little story, but he's kind of a nothing burger in my mind. But
yeah, well, Fields, I mean, he might be a decent backup. I mean, he is what he is.
He's no Nathan Peterman. He's better than that. We give him that.
He's no Turk Schonert.
Yeah. Oh, there's a good name.
Yeah.
I don't think Fields is fully litigated yet. I think the Bears have a real decision on their hands. They're going to have 2 bites of the apple in the draft this upcoming year, and even if they don't use it on the quarterback, they can trade it. They could go with Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean,
they could trade Fields.
Yeah, they could trade Fields. All those options are on the table. What's your take on him?
Well, there's the fantasy take. There's the real life take. He is certainly a little bit raw still. I think, he needs to play it out. At this point, though, injuries have become a concern. So durability is a big thing. And, I believe it. My co-host James Adams says it all the time. Availability is one of the most important abilities, right? I mean, doesn't matter how great a player is if you can't count on him to be there. It's one of the reasons I don't like Lamar Jackson. I still am counting on him missing a few games this season because he's going to get hurt. The thing is in fantasy, it's electric. I mean, the plays that he can make running the football alone make him a guy that could, on any given week, beat any given fantasy team by himself.
Yep.
What I really think his arrival back in the lineup is going to do, and I'm not liking the Bears as a real football team here. I have questions about their coach. I have questions about a lot of things about the organization. But from a fantasy perspective, I do like the Bears' upside. And I think, I'm looking at the backfield's a little cluttered. Obviously now with Khalil Herbert, assuming he comes off IR this week, obviously, we know Foreman's been pretty involved. Roschon Johnson is a guy who has a lot of talent, has done, but it's a 3-headed monster, so that's a mess. But man, DJ Moore, those last couple games before Fields got hurt, I mean, he was a top 5 or 6 guy, and he's still so young and so good. DJ Moore is the diamond that in that whole Bears offense that's just shiny and pretty. And what I'm most excited about, and granted, I have some exposure to I got enough teams. I got exposure to all these guys across my fantasy portfolio, but DJ Moore is the biggest winner in Justin Fields being back. Yeah. I definitely think that the Bears are going to put some points on the board. Of Cole Kmet maybe will be hurt by this quarterback change because he's been getting targeted, but he's still a capable tight end. He's still in the fence
he's
there.
good.
So
Yeah.
I think Justin Fields is a guy that, if I need a quarterback in my league and the Fields owner is out there with other options and has maybe become disgruntled or unsettled, I mean, he's a guy that I would, as many leagues are at their trade deadlines this week and next. I mean, he's a guy, if I need to move a quarterback, I think I would try to buy low on now before he comes back and has one of those good performances.
Oh, 100%.
Because that ceiling is about as good as it gets at the position, in my opinion.
Yeah, he was a top 5 fantasy quarterback last year. That stretch before he got hurt.
I don't think he's going to be a Chicago Bear next year. I'd be willing to bet on that. I don't know where he's going, but unless we see just a remarkable finish here by the Bears, I do think the team will go in a different direction and get what value they can. But that's even more incentive for them to showcase Fields, in my opinion, now.
I agree. We got to take care of a couple of reads real quick, some business. First of all, from our friends at Circa, get ready for the ultimate big game parties at Circa Resort and Casino. Super Sunday is in Las Vegas this year. Watch the big game poolside at Stadium Swim's big game viewing party. Massive screen, booming gain sound, and a view of the pyrotechnic and visual effects throughout the game. Snag the best seat in the sun with daybeds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more. Or touchdown at the world's largest sportsbook. Circa Sports for the Big Game Bash. 3 stories of football glory featuring a 78 million pixel screen. Book your seat with a variety of reservation options, including bottle service, open bar, stadium-style food, and more. Don't miss these legendary viewing experiences on February 11th. The Big Game Party is only at Circa Resort and Casino. Reserve today at circalasvegas.com. Also, RotoWire is sponsored by the good folks at Splash Sports. We're proud to enter with Splash Sports, a partner with them this football season. Splash Sports empowers gaming commissioners to earn by creating contests. Commissioners can set up contests, add their style, and enjoy the evolving Splash Sports platform for customized preferences. From daily to season-long contests, Splash Sports caters to various playing styles, such as DFS, Pick X, and Traditional Survivor. And unlike traditional sports books, Splash Sports pits you against friends and family, not the house. Splash goes beyond betting, a space where friends can connect, strategize, and share in the excitement of sports. RotoWire will be running weekly DFS tiers contests on Splash Sports this all season. Can you beat our experts? Visit rotowire.com/splash to enter today. I'm here with Dan Clasgens from Fantistics and Fantistics Insider. Catch his show 11 a.m. Eastern on Saturdays. He and James Adams host a great show there. Let's talk running backs. Jaylen Warren, one of the best per carry performances throughout the season. He actually got the named start, even though Najee Harris had the first touch of the game. But Warren is basically a 50-50 split with Harris right now. Are they both viable?
I think so. I mean, Pittsburgh's team wants to run the football, right?
Yep.
I mean, I think we've got the identity. I mean, we've had it for years, but I mean, they want to run the football. They want to play good defense. I mean, the stat of them and their yardage and how they win in these games, it's remarkable. But, when you got a great coach like Mike Tomlin and a team that buys into what he's selling, I mean, these types of things happen. And Mike Tomlin is, let's face it, I mean, he's one of the best coaches in the league.
Yeah.
He's had this formula for a number of years. Warren is a really exciting player to watch. I like his explosiveness. And, I think him and Ajay complement each other well. I think, what we as fantasy managers have to wrap our heads around is sort of letting go of, what we've looked at and valued Najee Harris, even before last season, as a guy, he was a first round pick, just a couple years ago in fantasy leagues. And he's just not going to be that. The volume was his friend. Now he lost the volume. But it's clear that he's still going to have a role. Clearly, I think the presence of both of them limit both of their upside. So I view them very similarly rest of the season as RB2 flex options. I would prefer Warren, especially in PPR leagues, to where I think Harris is a better bet for the goal line work. But it's going to be interesting. One thing we do know is that Kenny Pickett, they're not going to win games with him as the centerpiece. Not to say that, what they're hoping he does is not lose games. So I'll take both. I feel there's a lot more confidence I have in, getting some level of production out of that backfield than I do any of the Pittsburgh receivers, because it's just too volatile in that passing game.
Yeah.
So this week against the Browns, though, Jeff, I got to say, I mean, I I think that's going to be some tough task for either back to have very big days. So
yeah,
use with caution here in week number 11 would be my message.
Total rock fight of a game. The total on this one now is down to 33.5. I've never seen an NFL game that low. This is some Iowa stuff here. I mean,
yeah, I know. That's what I was just going to say. It's like I'm betting the under in Iowa games. I mean,
I'm a Northwestern guy. Iowa Northwestern set football back about as far as Iowa Penn State did a couple years. There was an Iowa Penn State game. It was like 6-5. I recall 10, 15 years ago. And just hasn't changed. Iowa's defensive coordinator is phenomenal. And
I mean, yeah, but like the Steelers, they know who they are. They don't try to be anything different.
Yep. Exactly.
I mean, when we see the Steelers and their receivers really go off, it's when they're usually from behind, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's interesting. I do think that Warren deserves to be called the starter. I mean, he's earned it. He's been more consistent. Clearly, you look at just about any metric that you want to look at running backs here, and you're going to see why everybody's so excited about him. And Dynasty, if we're looking at, talking about the long-term picture of these running backs, I mean, that's where I'm still a little uncertain on how high I am on Warren, just because of the volatility at the position and how we see these NFL teams move on from year to year. But I got to imagine if you're sitting on him in Dynasty right now, you got him at a really good price. So the ROI is looking pretty good at this point.
For sure. I think it's hilarious, though. Najee Harris is year 3? And people are talking about it as if he's washed. It's a cold world. It
is. Well, running backs, I mean, to be fair, I mean, the average lifespan is about like 5 years or something. So,
yeah.
I mean, he is getting up there. But, if you can get Najee Harris, 50 cents on the dollar, I'm buying him.
Yeah, I agree. I think he can still play. And all the, stats, all the analytic tools suggest that he's actually playing very well this year. So, Miami running back situation. Achane just got cleared for practice. He may play this weekend. Mike McDaniel was fabulously evasive in responding to a question today about his availability. He even goes, "Do you have big money in fantasy?" when asked about Achane's availability for this weekend. It's pretty funny. And then he went on this long tangent, talked about liking hydration at the end. It was just a masterclass in evasion.
Typical Mike McDaniel.
Yeah. But what are we doing with this?
Achane is, I mean, a guy that I'm kicking myself of not having more.
Me too.
On more teams. I think the knee injury, especially that he was dealing with late in the preseason, there probably scared me away because I was pretty high on him earlier in the summer. I mean, you want to talk about a guy that any touch of the football can be a highlight reel. I mean, he is the quintessential player there. It is interesting, though. I mean, Jeff Wilson, he reminds me of sort of the Pierre Strong stuff I was talking about earlier. He's going to have enough of a role to minimize it. And then you get Mostert. So the real loser here in the whole situation is Mostert and his managers, because he was a top 5 running back for a large stretch, and that's just not happening again. He might have a top 5 week here or there, but he's going to have weeks where he's not in the top 25. If I'm ranking those running backs for the rest of the season, I'd prefer to have Achane over Mostert based off of the upside, but I think they're going to end up with very similar workloads, frankly.
Yeah. And, the Miami offense took a turn after they lost Achane. They were not the same, quite as dynamic. Of course, you go on the road to Philly, you play Kansas City at 2 of those games. It's going to show that way too. But, you could tell there's just
I'm a little, I mean, it's a fun offense to watch, and it's great in fantasy. And as you mentioned, they were missing that key cog in those big games, but the way they've come up empty in Buffalo, against Philadelphia, in Germany, and they did come back and show a little heart there. I mean, I'm just not sure that they've gotten to that next level, right? I mean, I look at it like horse racing. I'm a big horse racing guy, and you've got your claiming races, you've got your allowance races, then you get into your graded stakes, and that's how I sort of view teams here. And right now, if the Dolphins were a racehorse, they've gone into these 3 stakes races and they haven't ran good yet. They've done all right on the claiming races, and then the allowance races. But, even if you look at last year before he got hurt, I mean, Tua Tagovailoa doesn't have very many just statement big NFL wins under his belt in his short career.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, maybe he just hasn't had enough chances. I'm not saying I don't think they'll come, but if I'm looking at the AFC right now and just ranking teams without record or just based off of how good I think they are, I'm not sure the Dolphins are even in my top 3 teams.
Oh, I'd agree. I think they still have they have to go get that signature win to get into that tier. The small defense of them is all three of those games were on the road.
True.
None of those had to come down to Miami.
Their playoff games are going to be on the road too, at least the big ones at the end.
Probably so. And at some point you got.
And what's this team going to be built to do if it gets into December weather? Go into Kansas City when it's 14 degrees and it's snowing.
Yeah, and, that Buffalo game in December last year though was a ticket to the Carnival game. Yeah, that was a fun game last year.
It was a game. That was a fun game, but
yeah.
It would be interesting. I mean, the Dolphins are the team to beat in the AFC East for sure. And I mean, on any given Sunday, you're talking about a team that can put up 50 points. So, I mean, they've got my attention in fantasy. There's no doubt.
Yeah, for sure. The two marquee games of this week are bookends. We got Bengals-Ravens on Thursday night, and then we got Philly-Kansas City on Monday night. Rare, awesome Monday night game. Probably the best game of the, perhaps the game of the year. It's a Super Bowl rematch.
It is the game of the year. It's a Super Bowl rematch. Doesn't get any better than that. And right now, it's the Super Bowl preview in my eyes.
Yeah. So let's break down these players a little bit there. Devonta Smith is someone who's had a couple of big games, but he's completely disappeared at times. Now that Dallas Goedert is out, is the volume trick up for him a little bit?
I was just going to say, I do think the Goedert injury will benefit Smith and seeing some of those target volumes there. And, even in a couple of those games where the numbers weren't there, I mean, he had one play in particular that came to mind. I'm trying to remember the exact game. I don't have it in front of me, but to where he literally had not one, but two 30-yard passes that were nullified because of holding penalties.
Mm-hmm.
There have been instances where, just missing, he's drawn a lot of pass interferences. I mean, so what I'm getting at is the targets have generally not dipped too much. So if we can keep the ball, I mean, there's been a couple of games where we've seen a little bit less than we'd like to in that area, but for the most part, the target volume's been there. And I think Goddard's injury obviously opens the door for more targets. I got to think there's a little bit of regression ahead for A.J. Brown based off just I mean, I can't expect the guy to get 125 yards every single week of the season. Right. And, they're going to match up against some defenses that, frankly, they're going to have to – they'll take A.J. Brown out to where they'll have no choice. So I like Devonta Smith. I think, if you're thinking he's going to live up to that second-round value that you saw late year in the high-stakes leagues, I mean, that may not happen. But if you reset your expectations and if your expectations are appropriately aligned, Jeff, you seldom get disappointed in life.
Yeah.
And my expectations for Devonta Smith right now is he's a solid back-end wide receiver too that has a pretty good ceiling, plays in one of the league's best offenses, and as long as Hurts' knee holds up, I don't see many instances where he's going to be on a lot of benches on any team I have him.
Oh, heck
in the weeks moving forward. So
I did have a hard time ranking him. I put him around 20 this week.
I've got him at 22 this week, and my rest of the season ranks, I've got him at 18 though. So entering week 11 here in half point PPR, and I think that's fair. I think he could easily exceed it. I think there's got a lot better chance exceeding that than necessarily falling short of it.
Agreed. Man, there's that little pocket of the draft there where we kind of felt left wanting. Higgins, we've kind of covered that a lot.
Higgins, Waddle, and Smith. These these second receivers from these prolific offenses. Yeah, Ridley.
Yep.
Well, I was never in on the Ridley hype to where it got as high as it did. I mean, I never had Ridley in the second round of it. I don't have many pieces of best ball because I couldn't get him. And it wasn't I didn't like him, but I just thought he was very overvalued.
I got him late in Fishbowl, but that was in July. Right. It's just
receivers fell in that pool too.
Exactly, because I was going to say there's other underlying things. So I only have a couple of Ridleys where I drafted early and got them later in the draft, but turns out the answer is Keenan Allen.
Keenan Allen. And, that's an interesting, I mean, not to get off topic of this Eagles-Chiefs game, because it is a great game I want to talk about. But, we have to remember that, there's a lot of chest pounding, you see on Twitter or X, whatever you're calling it. People that, go around, oh, I got this right, or I got this wrong, or this strategy is the best. And this, any strategy can work. Any strategy that you've ever heard of in fantasy can work. It's about nailing the right players at the right spots, Wait on quarterback. Only stream the quarterbacks. Well, if you drafted C.J. Stroud this year, that worked out great.
Mm-hmm.
You can go after quarterback early, and as you can see, so it's really just about getting the right players. I'm a person that's not tied to any singular strategy. I think, in certain formats and obviously certain draft slots, the way the board goes. I mean, and that's fine. Receiver drunk early, whatever it is you get, that's great. But my point is any strategy you take, you still have to get the players that you're picking to deploy that strategy correct. And a lot of times it's not even that they disappoint, it's injuries happen. So
Kirk Cousins, for example. I mean,
Exactly.
You waited on quarterbacks. You nailed it. You got Kirk Cousins. Congratulations. And nothing. You have nothing.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins. And the point that I think we need to remember and jot down now while we're in the thick of it, and rather than as we come in next year, is to realize, why did the strategy that I employed in this particular draft fall, and do a better job as fantasy managers looking at that and then applying those learnings moving forward, not necessarily completely scrapping there's strategies I tried this year. Guess what? These teams didn't work out, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to try the same thing next year.
Yeah.
Because, as the larger the sample size, the more data you have, the more you can make informed decisions on those types of things.
Exactly. Back to Chiefs Eagles real quick. Chiefs offense has been low-key disappointment. The two Broncos games, the Miami game in Germany was a disappointing game. You're happy. You're plenty happy with Kelsey. That's a write-off for me, whatever happened with Germany. But Rashee Rice, I think he's a critical guy coming down the stretch for them. Can they establish him? Can he take him to the next level?
He was a guy that I was buying in the preseason. The talent, what I was seeing in camp was there. It has been very encouraging to see his utilization numbers, continually to grow week after week after week. And, even watching the Manning cast on Monday night and listening to Patrick Mahomes and his interview with Eli and Peyton, I thought it was great conversation. And what I really appreciated about Mahomes, not just in that conversation, but really anytime I hear him talk, is his level of accountability. He realizes they suck. They've been disappointing. I mean, he was the first one to say, if it wasn't for our defense, we wouldn't be 7-2. We wouldn't be the number one seed. We realize we have to do this coming out of a bye. And that's what's interesting about this matchup is both teams have bye and then they get to play on Monday night. So the league really tried to make sure these teams are both as rested as possible for this game. So, it's not a disadvantage either way to either of the teams since they both had the bye. But Andy Reid in a bye week, I know what it is from a betting perspective, but as much as there's other coaches I think highly of, he, in my opinion, is the greatest coach in the NFL when it comes to game planning and offensive, at least over the span of his career. And, coming out of the bye week, I'm betting on Andy Reid. I'm betting on this offense getting better. I think Philadelphia's defense has a lot more holes so in the game, I definitely like the Chiefs. I already played it at 2.5 earlier in the week, and I am expecting Mahomes to go off for a really nice day. I think Rashee Rice is part of that plan. It will be spread around like it always is, but I think he's going off for 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, and having one of those weeks. And, I think the Eagles will keep pace. I think it'll be an entertaining game, but I think they're going to lose by 7 points or more in this contest. So I am, as much as, not necessarily a Chiefs fan, I am definitely all in on the Chiefs this week, especially coming out of this bye. And I think down the stretch, you're going to see a team that's going to start looking more like the Chiefs that we've seen in the past.
Yeah, I agree. And by the way, the Chiefs were always my second team. I went to high school in Kansas, moved there as a sophomore year. My family has converted over to being Chiefs fans.
So is that like during the Joe Montana Chiefs days and Marcus Allen Chiefs days, or is it a little earlier than that?
Steve DeBerg and
I was going to guess Steve DeBerg next.
Yes.
So.
All the Christian Okoye and all that. But now that this is Bengals Chiefs is a rivalry.
Yeah,
it's tough. It's really tough. But
I used to like Travis Kelce because he went to the University of Cincinnati as an Ohio guy. But then this, now I hate him. Now I hate Taylor Swift too because she's dating the guy.
My girls love Taylor Swift too much. I can't do that to them. But,
I know my wife and daughter will. They won't be watching this, but they would punch me right now.
Yeah, exactly there. So yeah, we'll end up on that game there. I am super excited about that one. I am boosting Rice up a little bit. I think he does take the next step. They are living in life with salary cap, and our Bengals are going to be in that world too. By the way, when we look at this offseason.
Well, the thing that's interesting about I'll say this about the Chiefs too is the one guy I think we're going to see come on into more involved down the stretch is McKinnon. Mm-hmm. And I think it was Jim Coventry. I was actually talking about this on our show when we had him on last Saturday. And he's right, because I remember hearing the same thing. They were talking about in the preseason that they saw how valuable he was down the stretch, but they didn't think he could hold up over the course of the season. So if you'll remember winning the fantasy playoffs last year, I had a couple teams that had McKinnon on it, that he was the difference maker.
Oh my goodness. Yes. He was massive.
And I definitely think that there's a lot to like about him down the stretch. Pacheco's been nails. So some of Mahomes' numbers have been because he's been so good in the running game too. So, and when your defense is doing the job and you're not playing from behind, I think those are all factors here that we have to consider.
Exactly. I reminder that I need to bump up McKinnon a little bit in my rankings, but I will do that. Dan, I know you've got a heart out here. Appreciate you spending some time with us. Thanks for doing a lot of great work, doing good in fantasy, do good fantasy, raised a lot of money for the veterans last week. And you do that for a living too. So appreciate your work there.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We wouldn't be able to play fantasy and do all these things we enjoy without the freedoms that we enjoy from all the brave men and women that serve. So
indeed,
I think that's always a good cause, and certainly appreciate, you having me on, Jeff, and always good talking football with you. Hopefully it will bring us some good luck with the Bengals here on Thursday night, but either way, we're going to crush it in fantasy, and now you don't have to sweat out your survivor pick anymore. So
there is that. And maybe we can meet up in Vegas in February.
That would be great, dude. That would be great. I hope to see you soon. Or another Super Bowl meetup will definitely happen one time in the future for sure.
Absolutely. All right, that's going to conclude today's podcast. Thanks everybody for listening, and make sure to check out our sponsors Circa and Splash, and check out Dan's work over at Fantistics. We've got John and Mario tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Take care.